All right, guys, we're back. It's Pompey, and I'm just giving some mixed down advice to my friend Cooper Lee, who produced this track. And on the last episode, we covered basses. So this time around, let's play with the drums. I'm not exactly sure how this is gonna end up, so it'll be kind of exploratory. But we've got a little drum break here. So let's listen to the track and then the drums in isolation.
Come on! There's a folklore legend claiming death to next of kin. Fuck that message, hope the mess never begins. Quote the raven, never once again. Kick that bird about the window that he's in. It's a
Alright, so we got a nice little, what is this, 2-bar loop that seems to go through the whole track. So, and there's some dropouts here and there, so pretty simple drum activity going on. And it's pretty much a break done wholesale. I always like to look at what kind of warping is used. Looks like we're using the Beats warping, which often is good with drums. But let's actually compare. Let's just see, because I have heard drum breaks that the Beats thing kind of ends up butchering, and that another way might be better. And I noticed that the original tempo 103, so that should give you an idea about how much it's needing to be stretched to come down, and what would happen if we switched it to like repitch instead. So let's just loop this part and solo the drums. Try warping it in different ways. I even think the repitch sounds kind of cool. It's just a little bit slowed down. If that pitch of drums, if it like slowed down, worked well in the track, then repitch is the least corrupting form of warp to use. Because it's not actually warping anything. Complex is usually the most faithful for just anything, but obviously Beats usually works pretty well on drums. So yeah, we'll probably keep with Beats. It doesn't sound like it's doing much, and also a fun thing to do is just play with the transpose a little, see if it's would sound better in the track at a different pitch.
Death to next of kin. Fuck that message. Hope the
Let's just take the vocals out while we're messaging with that. So when it's down 50 cents, that's one semitone, which is one note on a keyboard. And honestly, I feel like down just like half of a note is actually pretty nice. So I might actually keep that. And the thing is, that's just doing this one little clip, right? There's a whole bunch, but just to show, we can just select them all and then make the change we want to see in the world. Negative 25 semitones, say. It kind of sounds now like the snares are in better tune with the overall key of the track. If we were starting out with like a drum machine and like doing sample by sample, I would actually be tuning each individual drum perhaps to sound right. But it sounds a little better to me that way. It didn't sound bad before. But that's just an example of something you can do there. And also, since this track was slowed down to be where it is, it's also a little less distorted by virtue of being pitched down than it otherwise would have been by the warping. All right, so that's kind of a minor point. There's a more major thing going on here, which is that this drum loop is just being used whole, which is kind of a more old school way is to use like an entire loop of a drum break. And I'm not trying to like address any kind of creativity statement there. It's more a matter of like production control, and I've found that I enjoy actually, even when I'm using a break sort of solid in the order that it was originally played, and even though those all sounded good on that record in the 70s or whatever, I like to still slice the bits out and put them in separate tracks and treat them separately. It tends to make the drums bang a little more and sound a little more appropriate for, kind of modern production. And I'm going to make a little sidetrack here because there's a song on my album Reinventing the Wheel called Cool Like That with Van Ghost. It's kind of a throwback to that Diggable Planet song that you'll recognize probably. And in this, I happen to use one of the most famous drum breaks ever, Impeach the President by Honey Drippers, and on different points in the track, I use it both as a straight loop and then reconstructed drum by drum. And so hopefully you'll be able to kind of hear the difference in kind of a finished product situation. And I'm also sort of plugging my record. But anyways, this is the source. Not giving away any secrets here. If you don't know Impeach the President, then get yourself a copy. All right, people that don't know or have just realized where like 20 songs they love came from, probably. But, most people are aware of that break, if you're aware of any. It's maybe third most used after Amen Brother and Funky Drummer, if I had to guess. Now, let's listen to the beginning of the track where I've sliced out each individual drum and, all treated them separately when they drop.
Yeah. They say that if you walk, you can dance, so if you talk, you can rap, right? No, you probably can't. Honestly, man, I hate to trot on your plans, but at some point, a line must be drawn in the sand. Now it's Ray, a drop of golden sun. And if you thought of that, you're not the only one. Nominally funded since my chronicles begun, and I've been taught to throw a punch when it's illogical to run.
All right. So they were all very isolated. Now, in the second verse, that's where Van Ghost comes in. It starts somewhere around here. So you'll hear it go from that sort of very isolated drum sounds to one with a little more ambience, and that's because it's got the full loop all in one track kind of together. Though I've gated it and done some other things to make it sound more staggered, but you'll see it go from one style to the other. It was all I could do not to make it sound just completely disjointed, but for some reason I felt like that was what I wanted to do under Van Ghost's verses, to have the drums change when the rest of the track did.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got my man Van Ghost in the house tonight. He just came from off tour, and
I think they got something they want to say.
Braggadocious, I'm dope like a bag of Doja. Grab your coat, I'm colder than the cola that you're cracking open. Passing notes to your bitch, I gotta laugh and hoping that she get the D from me. So please stop acting Shogun. Leave the ashes smoking, rolling in the pack Corolla. Cash to blow, you have to know I'm acting like a Casanova. No one couldn't handle this flow. I've got the craft of over, light it up and take a few hits. I'm not Jewish, pass it over. You got it backwards like you're asking Yoda.
All right, got it backwards like you're asking Yoda. So if you see what's going on there, that's a little more fluid, more sort of direct use of the groove of the original break, whereas the other one is very kind of syncopated, punctuated, and so forth. And so in addition to like the actual drums being in different order and programmed differently, it also has a bit of a different feel. I tend to prefer things being as chopped up and as controlled as they can be. So I suspect that I would like to do that same thing on this track and not just have these occasional chops. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. But we've got this main loop here. And it's going to be a challenge because there's a lot of shuffle going on, you know, and it's kind of hard to slice it up and you know, not lose that shuffle pattern, but we do want to preserve that groove. You could also do like some slice to MIDI action if it, you know, and do it sort of more MPC style, but I don't think that's what I really want to do is preserve the programming, the, you know, exact order they appear now, but just be able to do different processing on different drum hits. So it's not so much about being able to MIDI reprogram it in this case. So this is a kick drum. Let's label this track KD for kick drum. Some people use VD for bass drum. And you know me, I'm going to group these. Drums. And so there's a kick, but then there's also some hi-hat shuffle there. So we'll do one for the hi-hats. We're going to need one for the snare. And this is where the quantization really helps me select mostly the right pieces. And so if that's not at a good, if the Snapchat grid isn't at a good resolution for you, you might have to change it. But other times, you know, when you just want to drive things around freely, I think it's Command 4 makes that grid go away, and then things don't snap. So, you know, at some point, I'm going to have to go back and forth between those to get things in exactly the right place, possibly. All right, so is that the snare? There's another kick. Boom, chuck. And let's just send these down here. These take up a lot of space with the clips visible, so let's just compress them and I can drag them around a little easier for now. What we got here, probably some more hi-hats. And then comes back around to the snare. This gets a little tedious, but there's only this one loop, I'll remind you, you know, so it kind of only has to happen once. Snare. Let's get a loop, short loop going. And there's actually another instrument here, which is a tambourine. So let's throw that next to the hi-hats here, is that we've got tam for tambourine. And there's going to be a lot of situations. You remember, you may not remember it. If you do remember, when I saw the way the drums had been originally processed in this, you know, you've got something, boy, that would sound really great on the snare. This would sound really great on the kick. You put them together, they just sort of cancel each other out. You don't want to apply them all to the entire drum chain. And, you know, hey, who knows? Maybe it makes the tambourine sound like crap. So that's the big motivation for splitting these out, is so that the right drum can get the right treatment and volume and everything for this track, not for the track they were originally in. Okay, so that's one. And the second one is just that same thing, I think, with this one little exception. Yeah, just another snare thrown in there. So let's basically duplicate this and then add that second bar variation. All right, nice. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, like it feels like the drum loops in this track. If I were making it today, it kind of is more like one of my a little earlier tracks. Well, most of the songs on my album actually don't have as much drum variation as I would like, and I do a little bit more of it now. These are kind of a simplistic drum thing, so it is kind of hypnotic. So in a way that's good. But I will say it is very good that there are these little dropouts and things. Gotta have it be somewhat interesting. The pattern of like varied every 2 bars, that's great and all, but you probably want to do more things like, and every 8 bars have another little fill that happens, and every 16 bars, going into the chorus, do something other interesting. The drums should kind of telegraph changes in the song that are gonna happen. But lucky for me, this is a mixdown tutorial and not a production tutorial, so I don't have to do any of that. This whatever's been done here is a creative decision, and darn it, Cooper, I respect that. Sweet. So now we've got this drum group here, which is replacing this guy, and obviously what we're gonna do is just Command D duplicate these guys to mirror the whole pattern of the drums and the track at large, so it can replace just all of these. Looks like it just gets cut off there, so we'll do that after we've done all that duplication, right? That got all of them yet. All right, easy. So I'll just snip them out where the old drum loop dropped out, and we should have just sort of a mirror image. Now, another neat thing is like now they're all here where if we wanted to do those rearrangements and little variations, it would be a lot easier. We'd be in a good spot to do that, because all the pieces are just sort of there for us for whatever kind of manipulation we want to do. All right, another dropout there, and one more there. Sweet. So now this guy, probably just mute that guy. Won't need him anymore probably. And whatever processing warm and wide drums, that's a nice one. And then these sort of contradictory EQs. Let's sort of backport those onto this new reproduction of the drums we've got. So this, it probably just wants to be on the kick, and we'll probably change it a little too. The snare probably just wants to be on the snare. And then we'll see what the hi-hat and the tambourine want, because they weren't accounted for. We've got this warm and wide drums master, but as you can see, it looks like we got a... Is this... Oh, the stereo enhance isn't even on, so it's just warm drums. I guess it's not wide drums. The width is just at 100. And so this is just a sort of compressor and a little subtle EQ band going on is all that's going on here. So this is a sort of an example of a deceptive use of an audio effect track which has sort of a different purpose. But I'm sure it was doing a good thing though, because that's what I would have done. I would have put a glue compressor on this. Let's see. All right, so let's listen to these now. Alright, the kick drum is a little out of control with this just extreme boost here. There's the hats. And we can now process these independently in a lot of ways. So let's just let's limit them all, why don't we? Gotta turn this one way down since we did that so hard. This guy actually doesn't need to come down at all. That tambourine. Tambourines can get away from you sometimes, so I always limit the tambourines. Little snare drum. Nice snare. I may steal that for a sample pack or something. Yeah, and I definitely going to EQ all these. Let's just start from the bottom up. Tambourine. You need a little tighter loop if we want to hear what's going on with it. Now that sounds kind of crappy. I think the hi-hats may be getting butchered by the warping here. It sounds a little less bad. Anyways, we could definitely experiment. Like now that we've got them in little pieces, the hi-hats could get a different warping. We could make all the hi-hats complex pro, or even make them unwarped and not worry about the timing of such short clips, and see how that sounded. For now, I'm going to just make them complex and see what happens. Sounds a little less garbled, but you know, it's something to keep an eye on. And here we go. Let's EQ it. Oh, that was the hi-hat. I was listening to the kick drum and adjusting the hi-hat. I'm giving a subtle low cut on the kick drum, which for a lot of tracks you want to do if you've got a sub bass. You know, the kick drum is the only thing other than the sub bass that has any business occupying the sub range, but even then it should sometimes not go all the way down, because there's just not much sub range to go around. I'm gonna low cut this at about 50, maybe 60. This guy is not a kick drum at all. That's a hi-hat, isn't he? There we go. So that's cool, and we can do more than just individual EQs to all these guys. We can do individual saturators, individual compressors to kind of bring out the ambience of sounds. It never really ends. And in particular, we can also give these guys some reverb, and it's important maybe not to just run the reverb over the entire drum track, because usually the kick drum doesn't like the reverb, or it doesn't like the same reverb as like the snare drum, for instance. So it's nice to be able to tune how much each one gets. I'm not going to put that in now because all we've got in the return tracks is a vocal reverb, and it would be probably a different reverb for the drums. So let's not get sidetracked here. Let's listen to these all together. Now let's contrast that after, and actually, I think the tambourine is too loud, and it was probably too loud the whole time. Now we just have control. Alright, now let's look at that glue compressor that's binding these guys all together. We can kill that and just make our own. And what I'm about to do here is give a fairly extreme compression, like 4 is a pretty high ratio, and a lot of gain reduction in the threshold. But I'm also going to back off the dry wet, and that's called parallel compression. On drums, it's often called New York compression as well, which maybe is the best reason to use it because it's a cool name. So 10 decibels gain reduction, 10 decibels makeup. They match. Let's A-B. Definitely sounds louder, but it isn't actually louder because the makeup is the same as the gain reduction. So good. Now let's put that on, some amount, not all. And New York compression, as I said, it's often used on drums to give a highly compressed sound but still let the dynamics of the original show. It does sort of a tight compressor half on does in some cases a more desirable sound than a lighter compressor all the way on. So that's what's going on there, and I'll throw on soft clip just in case it has a hard clip in there. Now let's compare this to what we had before. We'll make the volume equal just to, have a fair fight here. All right, I think it pops a lot more, actually. I think it really lets the drums stick out, and that's going to let them stick out in the overall mix better. And hopefully we didn't butcher the original groove. The timing's all the same. I just drug them to different tracks. I do hear some clicks that are created by the sample cutoff points not being the best, and you can get rid of those with just a little bit of fades. But I don't have Ableton enabled. I don't have it set to create fades automatically when I create things. Let's go in the preferences and let me try and find where that is. Yeah. Loop, warp, short samples, yes, but create fades on clip edges, No. So set those however you like, but I don't like it to automatically put those fades in there. And in this situation, it's fine because the beginning of the sample was not the beginning of the actual sound. And so I can fade in the sample, and then the sound is going to come in. But if the sound were at the dead beginning of this, like in a normal like sample pack, they'd all be very tightly chopped, then that automatic fade would have just taken out the beginning of my drum transient and taken the punch right out of my drum. And you don't want that to happen, without you knowing it. That's very bad. So I'm just going to put little beginning fades on those guys, and really I should have done that before I duplicated these clips to the rest of the track. So imagine that I did that, but in the mix we're not going to know that much. Just know that I heard those clicks, and that's how you get rid of them. It would be boring for you to watch me do it now. So this is pretty good in terms of that. Let's give these... Well, let's see how they sound. They have a little bit of natural reverb, because it was recorded from an acoustic kit, of course. But keep in mind, these has to sound right with the strings. And they maybe, the drums maybe sound a little dry in that environment. So let's make another return track. We could do it with another return track. Let's do that. And here's how you make a new return track. It starts out with just 2, but I often have like 5, 6, 7. Sometimes I have like 10 return tracks. That's maybe going a little bananas. So this is actually going to be not just any verb, but the Vox verb. On a tune, we'll start the same place. But or better yet, just to get on the right foot, let's start with a different preset. Let's start with drum room, which is probably a better drum room than small room, right? You'd hope. And first, let's just pipe them all in. Give this a name. We always name things. Drum verb. Alright, so I don't know why the pre-delay was so low as 8 milliseconds on the default settings of drum room, but I think that's very likely to muddy the sound of things like the snare, so I'm going to increase that. And then it's just a matter of like size, decay time. Dry wet's already at 100, that's good. Boy, you see how that, like, most of it sounds okay and the kick drum just sounds terrible? That's what I was talking about. So let's just not give so much of that kick drum to it. So little, if any. And then we give the hi-hats. Alright, I'll turn it off and on. We'll see if we notice the difference. And we could bring the overall level of that up and down over here if we wanted to. Let's see what it looks like. That's reasonable, and you can also do things like pan it left and right. But I noticed most of this track isn't balanced left, right much. It's all pretty mono, except where the sample sources were stereo. So we'll cover that in a separate episode. So that's cool. And sometimes I'll even like put a little delay on my snares and hi-hats and things, hi-hats especially. But that's more, if I've got a very, like, my hi-hats are just dit 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 and my drums are boom clap boom boom clap, So then you want to make it a little more interesting. There's already like interesting shuffle going on in the rhythms. So I think if I were to, drop a delay on the snare, I would probably just be, doing more harm than good. Working the bass. Cool. I think these drums are very likely to want a saturator. Let's try that. Definitely limit them. We can see where our track's going. Notice how the different saturator curves, give us a very different amount of like crushing sound. Because as I said, saturator's a fancy clipper. I'm still waiting for a track that I can use hard curve on because it sounds so dirty and badass and garage and crap. But, almost never do I actually want a track to sound like that. I just think it sounds really cool. Alright, so this is the part of the spectrum I feel this whole drum rack together seems the most noisy and not that useful. So let's try putting a little valley there. There's definitely some tuning left we could do, especially on the individual drums, but I'm really liking how these are sitting in. This thing sounds very loud right now. It could probably be taken down a bit. Alright, you have just learned all about breaking down a drum loop to its component parts and separating out the tracks for individual processing and getting the original loop to pop as much as you can. I don't know how I'm going to shorten that into a title, but I guess I'll have to. Goodbye, everyone.